Florida, actually.
Florida.
Okay.
There you go.
Now, no more kibitzing now that the recording started.
There we go.
Okay, I think it's about 3 minutes after. We will go ahead and get started. We will welcome folks as they join. Wanted to wish everyone a very happy holidays. It is the annual meeting of the membership. It's our final monthly membership meeting. We wanted to provide you with a little bit of an update on some things that are happening in OmniAir. We'll talk some about priorities for next year. We'll talk a little bit about what happened at our strategic planning meeting and what we have planned for our working groups next year. Then, of course, we've invited our guest presenter, Mr. Jason Pavluchuk, who is one of the premier Washington lobbyists in the transportation space, represents the MTC among other organizations, and will be providing us an update on what we can expect in the next Congress. So with that, I am going to ask Jordan to kick it off with the antitrust. Next slide, Jordan.
It is the policy of the OmniAir policy, OmniAir Consortium, that the organization, its officers, board of directors, members, and participants in its activities shall comply in all respects with federal and state antitrust and/or fair competition laws, regulations, and rules as may be applicable. Accordingly, no activity or discussion at any OmniAir sponsored meeting or other function relating to competition or relating to practices that may restrain trade is permitted. Such prohibited topics include establishing prices, allocating markets, encouraging boycotts, regulating production, or any other understanding or agreement that may be construed as anti-competitive.
Fantastic. Okay, and let's go on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we're going to have some updates and welcome several new directors, talk about where we've been in 2022, where we're going next year, and then, of course, Mr. Pavluchuk. And then we'll have a little bit of a preview of some of the events coming up in 2023, and hopefully an explanation for why I'm in Florida this week. Without further ado, let's move on. Let's get started. So we'd like to welcome 4 new directors who have been elected to 3-year terms to OmniAir's board of directors. We have joining us Maureen Bach from Oregon Department of Transportation. She is the Chief Innovation Officer, is a nationally recognized leader, and now is helping to jumpstart Oregon's nascent tolling program. So very excited to have Maureen's leadership. We have Bill McKinley, who's a Vice President with Keysight Technologies and has been a strong supporter and active participant in OmniAir over the years in our working groups as well as our plug fests, and of course Keysight being the first OmniAir qualified test equipment for CV2X testing. So we're excited to have Bill on board. Fernando Rodriguez, Vice President for DECRA Americas, has been an OmniAir supporter even before he was at DECRA, helped shepherd in the very first OmniAir authorized test lab ever in when he was with 7 Layers, and now with DECRA has helped us not only bring in the lab in Malaga as a CV2X lab, but also the lab in Sterling, Virginia as a RFID tolling lab. And Reed Siggety with Spoke, who's the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Strategy Officer there, is helping to bring in the new world of connected mobility and bicycles, protecting vulnerable road users. And Reed has a storied history in the ITS and connected mobility space, stretching back through his days at Panasonic. So really excited to have these folks joining the leadership. I don't know if we have any of them online, but if we do, we'd welcome them to make any comments. Do we have Maureen, Bill, Fernando, or Reed online? Well, I'm sure we'll have a chance to hear from them early in the year, and we just appreciate their continued support for OmniAir. Let's move on. So as I mentioned, we did last week have not just our board of directors meeting. Thank you to Harmon for hosting at their offices in Mountain View, but we had a day-long strategic planning session where we brought together our working group chairs and the board and the full coordinating council to talk about what our priorities will be in 2023 and 2024. We have an ever-growing number of working groups, sub-working groups, and lots of things for those groups to chew on. But I've asked Frank Perry, who chairs the technical working group, to walk us through some of the discussion from last week, and I'll invite any other board members who have participated there to comment as well. But Frank, what can you tell us about what we have planned for our work items for next year?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So obviously, you see in the chart we've got a lot of things planned, a lot of things in the pipeline, not just for next year, but out to potentially the 2027. So we're looking at how OmniAir can get engaged and remain engaged, and maybe get engaged in some new activities. So I'm not going to go through everything. I'll just highlight a few things that we're planning for next year. So starting at the top with tolling and emerging payments, we plan to finalize the multi-protocol test specifications, document 825. And then launch the multi-protocol certification program with an approved test site. So for applications, we're going to finalize the application certification program. That document is pretty close to being done. So we'll probably take January to polish it up, get it approved for approval for the board. And then in parallel with that, we're going to finalize the V2X or the V2X application test cases. So we have 2 documents around those test cases. And then we'll probably potentially launch an application certification program late next year. And these will be the applications, that we've been testing during the last several plug fests. We're looking at both field and bench testing. From the security perspective, we've recently stood up a sub-working group around 1609.2.1. So we're looking at test cases around that spec. We're looking at developing negative test cases for 1609.2, and then also developing test cases around the SMS manager and entity requirements document. For road user charging, we're going to develop that certification program scope and then start writing test cases around SAE J3217. For the RSU, we're going to finish up the RSU spec test cases around CTI 4001, including NPCIP 1218. And what kind of got cut off there, the last item on the slide is MEC, multi-access edge computing. So we're going to start tracking that and see if OmniAir has a role to play there. We're planning on having a stakeholder workshop probably the first half of next year, and then monitoring the activities around 3GPP release 16 and 17. Now, one thing that's not on there, and Jason kind of alluded to it when introducing the board members, is we're probably going to start looking at vulnerable road user certification program next year as well, since we have a gentleman from Spoke who is primed to lead that effort. So that's what I got. Thanks.
Fantastic, Frank. That's just a little bit of work. So I think, OmniAir is what you make of it. And we have plenty of opportunities if you want to roll up your sleeves and help shape the future of connected vehicle testing and certification programs. There are certainly opportunities to participate at multiple levels. So if you have colleagues in your organization or others that you work with in the industry you think would be great candidates to serve on any of these working groups, please do reach out to us. And if you'd like to help lead something, let us know. We're always looking for volunteer leaders. With that, let's move on. So a couple of highlights from the year. This is from the V2X Summit. This image here was held in August. I understand from USDOT that they have just released the proceedings for the V2X Summit today. I haven't taken a look at those. They also have some explanation about where they are in the communications with the FCC. Of course, we did our ex parte in November, talking about when we can expect those waivers and what the remaining issues are. So I'll certainly encourage folks to take a look at that when it's published today. But for our highlights, we have we have had several really great activities. We've qualified several key test systems. We have authorized our second lab for CV2X testing, an MOU with the Taiwan Telematics Industry Association, which we believe will lead to our first PlugFest in Asia. We're very excited about that. We have test cases for V2X safety applications, and as you heard Frank talk about that, we're moving very quickly to authorize that program in the coming year. Multi-protocol tolling certification, we had revised the test documents that were approved last year this time, and we are reinvigorated that effort to finalize that program. We are developing and hopefully approving soon a CISC test tool that will allow us to do conformance testing for the very first time in the history of the industry for multi-protocol RFID tolling, and that is CGOS, 6C, and TDM. So very important to the EasyPass agencies and as well as some others around the country. New program scope for infrastructure RSU certification. We have a new sub-working group that's led by Woody from Sasol Tech and on 1609.2.1. We'll continue to collaborate with the SCMS manager and bringing in some test cases and testing specifications from that organization. We've done 2 PlugFests, a number of technology demonstrations and workshops, webinars, and continued outreach. So just a few things that our members have been able to accomplish, and look forward to building on that success in the new year. Let's go on to the next slide. So we've also welcomed 14 new members, starting with Atos in the security space, to Caltrans, to Spoke, to several new members from Taiwan, Karma Technologies as well. Really, really excited to see this growth and continued internationalization of OmniAir. Next, please. So priorities, and if you heard Frank talk about it at sort of a more detailed level, we're really going to help grow our LTV2X certification programs. We were actually pushing through the very first device right now through that certification process, and we expect to see more once the FCC waivers are issued within the coming month, and we'll have more to share on that shortly. Also in January, we'll be launching our multi-protocol tolling certification program, making sure that we're going to message that availability of that program to the industry. We're doing some things to update our test cases and to address new standards that have been developed for RSUs. Application tests, we hope to take that, continue to evolve that in our PlugFests, bring the application tests to the benchtop systems, and then I'll launch that program. And of course, road user charging, we have this really significant effort that I think is really going to pick up steam now that our tolling group is finishing off our multi-protocol program. We'll be moving headlong into road user charging, and of course security, which is the perennial issue, will always be there, and we'll continue to iterate on that. Next, please. So just a reminder that we are very much in an inflationary environment. We've tried very hard to keep your membership dues flat for the coming year. You can see the prices have not changed this year, haven't changed since 2021. We'll continue that 2023. But we do encourage everyone, if you haven't paid your dues yet, please do so as soon as you can. The deadline is the 24th of January. If you have issues, you need to have your invoice revised in any way, reach out to Burkinda or send a note to our accounting group, and they'll be happy to work with you on that. And of course, we do have a sustaining partner program for the first time this year, and that program is inclusive of all certification services fees, as well as PlugFest registration fees and an executive level membership. If you hate going after purchase orders, this is the program for you. We're aiming to simplify your life and simplify ours. And we think, especially if you're doing multi-protocol tolling or multiple devices, it's a whale of a deal. So reach out to Ryan or myself if you're interested in talking about upgrading. Next, please. And we are going to be adjusting our pricing for certification services in the coming year. That's one area where we think things are going to tick up a bit. Device certifications are going to go up by $1,000. Multi-protocol is going to adjust accordingly, as well as some of the other services that we offer. However, we encourage you, if you're price sensitive, to really consider that sustaining partner package. It's an all-inclusive, all-you-can-eat program, and I think it's budget friendly as well. Next, please. And of course, our PlugFest fees are going to tick up just a little bit, just a hair, to make sure that we're in line with where the industry is. And there will be some early bird pricing, so stay tuned for that when we do the announcement for our spring PlugFest coming up in January. And we can give a little hint about what that will be later in the call. So look forward to that. Next, please. All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce my good friend, a colleague I've worked with for the past 20 years. Nobody understands Capitol Hill and US DOT and transportation policy and the intersection between that and technology than Mr. Jason Pavluchuk. Jason, as I've mentioned, represents a number of transportation and transit organizations around the country. He has really great expertise in transit, TDM, ITS, and he also has his kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening. And of course, we had an election, and elections matter. And let's find out what that has in store for the ITS community. Mr. Pavluchuk, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Jason. If it's possible, if I can share my screen. There we go. All right. Share the right one. How are we looking? We looking okay here?
It says you've started sharing the screen. There it is. Look at that. That's beautiful. Okay.
Thank you. So just want to spend a few minutes sort of giving a little bit of a federal policy roundup. Start with, I think, a summary of the infrastructure bill 1 year later. I think there's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of things that we can learn from, I think, that are relevant to your organization as well as the members looking ahead. Again, remember that this legislation is a 4-year bill. 5-year bill, so we've got 4 years left. Talk a little bit about the 2022 election, what did happen, more importantly, what didn't happen. And then again, look at the 2023 and the year ahead and what Congress and the administration and others may be looking to do. So let me start with the the infrastructure bill, also known as IIJA, also known as, in some forms, Build Back Better. I think this legislation's got 1,500 different names. I long for the day when we just called it T whatever. But the infrastructure bill, to remind you, is a generational piece of legislation and funding that guarantees a significant increase in highway, transit, and rail funding for the United States, somewhere upwards of more than doubling in some cases, federal investment in transportation. Also focusing in a lot of new areas, a lot of focus on innovation, electrification of the transportation system, and other things, other notes. What we've learned, 1 year into this legislation is that the number of discretionary programs or competitive grant programs, in many ways, have really taken a lot of the energy. In terms of what DOT is working on. Just to put things in perspective, prior to, and I actually have the wrong one up, sorry. Yep, I do, sorry. I think I've got the wrong presentation up, but we'll work with it. Prior to this legislation, prior to IIJA, the FAST Act, had 1 or 2 competitive grant programs. Generally, they were called Tiger or Raise or Build. This piece of legislation in particular has $150 billion plus of competitive grant programs. You cannot go 2 weeks without US DOT talking about, in some form or another, a new federal grant program that is being noticed. The challenge with that is that DOT in many ways is understaffed. That goes back to a lot of factors. The Trump administration did not rehire people who retired or left the jobs. There was a significant wave of retirements that took place and are continuing to take place within US DOT, sort of a baby boomer effect to some extent. where you see a lot of jobs and positions being left vacant. And the net result is that you have a lot more work to be done and a lot fewer people to do it. So we're seeing IJA and the competitive grant programs. They're unveiled, they're being unveiled, but in many ways, it's been a very, very slow process. And a lot of what we are noticing is that, the grant programs that have been made available, many of them still haven't been made available. I look at a program that used to be called STSFA that many of you have been involved with. That is, in many cases, the small pricing pilot program that generally has received $15 to $20 million a year. That program has not been released yet or announced yet. The congestion reduction program that many of you may be interested in has not been released yet. The one program that I hope many of you participated in and or are aware of is the Smart Cities program. Very interesting how USDOT made available the Smart Cities program. For those of you who recall, back in 2000 and I believe it was 16, USDOT held a Smart Cities program where they offered a $40 million carrot and then had states and their cities compete for the $40 million. There was some thought that that's what they were going to do with the Smart Cities money. In many ways, that's what was intended. But I think what DOT did was actually better. What they did is, with the first year of Smart Cities, is that they went out to cities and said, year one is not about implementation. Year one is about planning. Send us your project request, help us solve a problem using technology, using innovation, whether it be vehicle to vehicle, whether it be vehicle and infrastructure, whether it be solely an infrastructure-based solution. But send us a solution or a problem and how you think innovation and technology can solve that problem. And the first year of funding will just be planning. It in many ways will be helping agencies cross over modes. Again, it's one thing to put fiber in the middle of a conduit in the middle of a street. It's another to have that fiber talk and work collaboratively with vehicles, with the system, what have you. So I think it's incredibly important what DOT has done. So if you are not aware of, if you are not a part of the Smart Cities grant, I would strongly urge you to watch for the announcement of winners, because as private sector entities, and many of you on here are, I would encourage you to look at what's selected and make yourselves known to the organizations that are doing things that you think your technology or your company can solve, because that's what year one of the Smart Cities grant is about: finding out what's available and what technologies are available to solve a problem. And in many cases, vendors are sort of already in mind, but I know a lot of cities that have looked at specific problem areas and recognize that, hey, we want to solve it using technology. We just don't know what technology is out there. So certainly keep an eye on that. And I expect those grants to be made public or to be announced probably in March. That is what DOT has said. So reality is probably April, because I think obviously these things take time. But year one, what we've learned, I think, from IJA, and for those of you who have been a part of competitive grants or are looking to be a part of a competitive grants, is that this administration is putting its money where its mouth is. There have been plenty of administrations that have said, we are going to focus on fill in the blank. And then the awards come out and it's completely separate from what, DOT has publicly said they wanted to focus on. And it's not the case here. The administration has made very clear what its preferences, what its priorities are, and that is clearly reflected in the solutions. So one of the things that I have been urging my clients is, especially in the private sector, is to be the ornament on the tree. And by that, I mean, there's only so many ways you can talk about a road capacity project or a road, a state of good repair road repavement project, right? Like there's just only so many ways you can describe what the project is and what the need is. But if you're adding elements to the project, especially in the ITS world, where you're not just building a road, but you're building a complete road with fiber in the intersection, with smart traffic signals, with whatever the ornament may be, that project suddenly becomes a lot more competitive. So I would urge, and I think what we're finding is that public agencies are having a better understanding of the grants, when they're going to come, what they want to go for. And more importantly, those that have lost are figuring out that, gee, I just can't submit the same old road construction project. I got to think about ways to add different elements to address the priority areas of the administration. So I think it's a two-way street. I think you'll see more agencies reach out to companies to figure out what value they can bring. And at the same time, I think it's incumbent upon companies to reach out to those partners of yours, and those in your Rolodex, and say, hey, listen, we'd like to talk about what we can do to be a part of any future grants that you're submitting. Because again, a $2 million, $3 million, $4 million addition to a road widening project could make the difference between an agency receiving it and not receiving it. So I would certainly encourage all of you to keep that in mind. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about as well is the election. And it seems though my slides are not behaving. Jason and his team have my full slide deck that they will send around. So I'm going to just speak from memory right now.
Let me just ask a question really quickly. Jordan, can you put up Jason's slides that you should now have a copy of?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and do that? We'll control from here, Jason.
Perfect. And hopefully it's the right deck, because whatever deck I just pulled up from my Dropbox did not have the right slide. So hopefully.
Okay, we're going to quiz you on whatever it shows.
Hopefully it's.
Well, let me just count. While Jordan's getting that keyed up, right? So, how different is the world? How earth-shattering is this for transportation? Do you think the impact will be on policy, or is it going to be a funding impact? I mean, I know we're running right up against a deadline right now for a CR, but I mean, give us. I kind of remember what happened in 2011, right after the sort of Tea Party wave, and some divided government. What are we looking at? Something like that, or are we looking at something different?
No, I think in many ways it's to be determined. And what the takeaway from the midterm elections is that as much as things were supposed to change, they didn't. There were 34, 35, I think in this case. And hopefully it's slide 3, or I'm sorry, slide 6 that I'm on here, Jordan, I believe.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, smart grants, keep going. Yep, I've covered that. Next slide. I think the very next slide here. Yeah. So you see here there were 35, I think in this case, because there was a special election in Georgia. Senate elections, 1 seat switched. Now you think about all the different competitive seats, 1 seat switched. And when it came down to it, there weren't that many competitive seats. There were thoughts that the big red wave, quote unquote, would put Patty Murray in Washington in danger, would put a couple of these other seats in danger. And the reality of it is that Arizona's was close, but it didn't require a recount. Nevada was close and didn't require a recount. And Georgia, they went to a runoff, largely because of state law requires the winner to receive over 50%. But Warnock sort of had Herschel Walker by a percent and a half, which is not a lot, but in today's political environment, it's significant. So I think what we learned is that as much as things changed, were supposed to change, they didn't. In the House, same thing. There were talks about Republicans winning, upwards of 40 to 50 seats, and that the majority in the House would be 250 to 240 to 195 or something like that. That is not the case. Republicans picked up 19 seats, many of them, ironically enough, in the Northeast, where in New York they had really, it was a factor of districts being redrawn, but Democrats picked up a number of seats in areas that they weren't necessarily supposed to. A lot of that gets down to, what, to answer your question, Jason, is where's the Republican Party going? The Republicans have control of the House by 4 seats. They do not have, at this point, a clear path to bring someone to the Speaker. Because remember, the Speaker of the House is elected by the entire House, and usually it's a formality. But there are 5 Republicans right now who are on record saying no way to Kevin McCarthy. And that's one more than they're allowed to lose. So does someone backtrack? Does a Steve Scalise become the Speaker? No one knows. I had dinner with Sam Graves last night, and he had as many questions as we did. And the reality is that what this means is that the Republican Party, usually the party that comes into power, uses November and December to set their agenda, to begin to chart a path. They don't know who their leader is yet.
And just for everyone's benefit, Sam Graves is the incoming chair of the TNI committee.
The TNI committee, yep. So, not only do we not know who the Speaker is, that trickles down. Chairmanships are not yet finalized. It's widely assumed in many cases who will be chairman of many committees, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But when you get down to subcommittee chairs and all those things that are supposed to have been wrapped up by now are still very much in flux and very much in the air, which gets to the question of what will Republicans be? And I think you can go to the next slide, Jordan. When you look here at the chairmanships, a lot of these are new folks, but you see in the Republican side, there's a lot of lack of clarity. And with TNI, Sam Graves will be the chairman of the committee. It is my understanding that Rick Larson from the Seattle area will likely be the new Democratic lead for TNI. Peter DeFazio is retired. Eleanor Holmes Norton has seniority, but she is nearly 90 years old, if not more than 90 years old, and is the representative of the District of Columbia, which of course is not a voting member of Congress. So the choice was that they went with Rick Larson, and that will all be finalized. But for the Ways and Means Committee, which handles taxes, there is no finalized idea who the chair is. Energy and Commerce, that you all should be aware of, because it handles so much of automation and technology aspects. The chair will be Kathy McMorris Rogers, who represents the Spokane area of Washington, and then Frank Pallone from New Jersey. And then the Senate, we do have a pretty clear idea of who will be leading the different committees, and it is most of the same people. The one very obvious difference is that instead of Roger Wicker in the Senate Commerce Committee, Senator Ted Cruz will be the ranking Republican, and that is as night and day as you can get in terms of leadership and style and all that. So it'll be very interesting to see how Maria Cantwell and Ted Cruz work together? ? So that's what we're looking at. But if you look at what it means for 2023, and if you can move to the next slide, it gets down to, again, what are the Republicans, who are they going to be? And I think that's, a very, I call it the level of attack dog. Will everything be oversight, Hunter Biden 24/7, discussions of impeachment? Or will they look to use their 2 years, the next 2 years, to find common ground with Senate Democrats on automation, which is a huge issue, on technology-related issues? Do not lose sight of the fact that what is going on with Facebook and Twitter and all of those things divides Congress in a very weird way. It is not Republican versus Democrat. It's very much divided in different ways, and how all that data and privacy and all those things come together affect all of us in the technology and transportation world, in very clear ways. So, is it a matter of that they will come together and try to find common ground? Next year, there's a couple of must-pass bills. They'll obviously have to do a budget. They'll have to do a debt relief, debt ceiling increase. So there's a lot of things that they have to do. But what will be very interesting, and I think it'll be decided in the next few weeks, is will the House immediately jump into 2024 election mode and serve as sort of an attack dog oversight, or will there be sort of a softening, and will they have learned from the 2022 midterm elections that we cannot be Trump's advocates because that's just not working right now with the general public. So I think there's a little bit of to be determined. And quite frankly, I think that leads to what the Senate will do. Will it be a legislative body? Will the Senate, now 51-49 versus 50-50, continue to work on different policy pieces, immigration, again, automated connected vehicles, what have you? Or will they recognize that the House is clearly just going to take a more political, more attack dog position, and then the Senate spends the next 2 years confirming judges and putting people in positions on the bench that can forward Democratic entities. I think it all begins and ends with what happens with the speaker's race, and I think we'll begin to read the tea leaves there. From an infrastructure perspective, I think there will be a lot of oversight. I think there's going to be a lot of analysis on how these dollars are being spent. Obviously there's a significant focus on electrification. That's not entirely in the Republicans' bailiwick. That being said, it's funny how many recycled battery facilities and those types of clean economy manufacturing sites are finding themselves in South Carolina, Texas, Georgia. So I think there's going to be a lot of oversight in the transportation world. I think there will be things to watch in terms of data privacy. I think there will be an attempt to do the AV START bill or some version of an automated connected.
Can you talk about that a little bit? I'm sitting down here at the Florida AV Summit, and everyone's been looking at after years of trying and failing, is there a new opportunity with sort of new leadership in Congress to try to revisit that? Do Republicans view that in a different way than perhaps in terms of prioritizations? Is there an opportunity there? And then and the other question I have is somewhat unrelated. We do have a very international membership, and a lot of members in Europe and Asia, and with all the ARA money and the money for the IRA money that came in for vehicle electrification and green jobs and whatnot, there are some quite heavy Buy America provisions that have been that are there. And Macron came to town last week and visited and had some concerns that he expressed to the Biden administration about what that means for competitiveness of some of the firms in within our ally countries. Just maybe walk through the AV and then maybe get to the trade issues.
Yeah, I'll talk to the AV. The AV bill is there has been years and years of trying to get legislation that effectively set up a policy framework to guide, support, depending on who writes the bill and how it's written, a little more guidance versus a little less support or vice versa. I think that there's still bipartisan interests in moving a piece of legislation that both guides and supports the rollout of automated vehicles. There was a little bit of steam taken out of the sails, largely because the Biden administration did not place a huge priority on it. They focused more on electrification than they did automation. But I do think that there is both a desire and a need to look at creating a federal framework on how automated and connected vehicles will be rolled out into the United States. And I do think at the end of the day, I said this a few times, data and privacy is what's going to take that legislation from something that people would like to pass into something that becomes more of a must pass. And again, for all of you, the context of it being that, the Twitter stuff and whatever isn't made up, you're wondering how does that have to do with you guys? Well, it's data, it's information. And once you dive into that pool of how to regulate data and how, what data isn't private, what is free speech, those things that are analyzed, I do think that you begin to get into how that applies to the transportation space. And that's something that was a huge sticking point, quite frankly, and why the AV Start bill did not move, because there was some disagreement about who owned the data. And it gets down to, if the driver doesn't own the data, it's the manufacturer who can determine, where a vehicle gets fixed. Because if you can't read what's going on in the car, you can't fix the car. So, there's a lot of those issues. So I think that, the AV Start bill in many ways has been a want. I think it has become more of a need, as a result of non sequitur issues. As far as Buy America and electrification, what this administration is finding very quickly is that we have neither the supply chain, the capacity, and they're soon to find out, nor the electricity to do all of those things domestically. One of the first waivers that came out of the IIJA bill was for electric vehicle charging stations, and a limited waiver that looked at using foreign components. I think you're going to continue to see that, reluctantly. I know this administration has two competing interests. They would like to get an electric vehicle network up and running as fast as possible. At the same time, they'd like to have a lot of that manufacturing done domestically. But there's a story about hopes and dreams. So I think at some point in the very near future, the realization that despite the investment in supporting manufacturing, domestic manufacturing, and all those things, that to get where they want to go in terms of electrification, they will have to leverage foreign sources for many of those materials, both raw materials, manufactured goods, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know which priority they're going to pick. But I do know that is a constant and internal battle that is being fought right now. It does not go unnoticed that many of the manufacturing plants that are being put up right now are being positioned in right to work states. Keep in mind, the Buy America stuff is all largely driven by unions. And this is an emerging field. So there isn't necessarily, AFL-CIO, 324 chip makers union, this is all sort of new manufacturing in many ways. So there's a lot of competing interests. So, but I do think you're going to begin to see some relaxation, some recognition by the administration that if they want to get to where they're going on electrification, that they're going to have to bring in, allow foreign markets enter the market. And we're seeing other trade issues right now in Europe related to taxes on income and other things, where if we as a country take too strong of a position, Europe will begin to sort of, within the rules of all trade agreements, begin to punish us. So I think you're going to see folks back down.
Well, let me just very quickly, I know it's on everyone's mind, connectivity and the 5.9 gigahertz, and the reallocation happened with the FCC of that, but then FCC has sort of sat on some of the waiver requests and has yet to issue the final rules, which a lot of our members are watching for. And we've seen some hopeful signs. We did our own ex parte with the FCC, and I know USDOT has been working with them, and then there's still some remaining issues on out-of-band interference and military radar potential interference. But do you see anything that the sort of on the horizon, either from the administration or the Congress, that kind of gives you hope that that we'll see more Avita X deployment in the coming year?
I want to say yes, but I also at the same time know everything the FCC and NTIA, what their focus is right now. I mean, FCC is under a lot of pressure, not only as far as this issue is concerned, but mapping issues and the expansion of broadband. So again, it's a non sequitur issue, or at least not directly related. But the reality of it is that the FCC is again overwhelmed, with a workload, keeping in mind that its own leadership has been in flux. It's tough to sail a ship without a captain. So I think this is something they want to do, but it's not something that you're going to see imminent action on. I think in the next 6 months. I do believe that other factors related to the spectrum, are going to sort of force the FCC's hand. I don't know if losing Wicker, I think, hurts a little bit. While he's been very opinionated on the issue and all those things, I don't know where Cruz stands on this. Cruz is not, in many ways, he's a bomb thrower. I mean, that's what he's good at doing. He's not a problem solver, whereas Wicker has often demanded problems be solved and has gotten in his way in many times. So I want to say yes, because I do know I've been a part of similar discussions where they recognize how critical this is to all the other things they want to do. But I have to be realistic, and my experience tells me that as much as they would like to tell us this will be resolved soon, I think it's going to take some time. I also think it means this stuff needs Congress to sort of put a boot in the behind of the FCC, and I think it's important that you as an organization and your members break it down for your members of Congress that this is relatively complex stuff, but in layman's terms, all these great things we want to do in transportation are balled up because of a spectrum issue. And
well, Jason, you've been doing this for years. I mean, so do you think it's for our members who have not been necessarily engaged, but have equities that are impacted by the new Congress? Is it worth some of the smaller technology companies getting up there and sharing and talking about what they're doing?
Early and often in 2023, absolutely. I think if there is an appetite to do things, it's going to be early. It's going to be in 2023. I think there will be opportunities. There are those in my field who feel like the next Congress is going to be a nothing burger. It can't. There are too many things that Congress has to pass: a budget, a debt ceiling, a Defense Authorization Act. Those are things just like we see in this Defense Authorization Act, where a lot of items get attached to. So, I don't expect there to be a whole process where Congress is legislating this and doing this. But is there language in a defense authorization bill somewhere that says, you FCC, you must do X, Y, and Z? Yeah, there very well could be. And there has been in the past.
So there's opportunities, right? There's appropriations and authorization opportunities to get things done.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, look, this has been a whirlwind tour. I know that you're busy, and as you mentioned, your battery is
it's about to die.
Its last legs. But I would ask if you could put your contact information in the chat box. I'm sure our members many of our members will have some questions they might not feel comfortable asking in front of everybody, but I'm sure you'd be happy to help.
I absolutely will. Actually, Jason, if you don't mind typing it out, because I am literally on my Surface and I can't pull the keyboard up. But it's also in the slides, and feel free to send my slides around. My contact information is in the slides.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate your insights.
Take care, guys, and good luck to you, and Merry Christmas to everyone, and Happy Holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you, sir. All right, well, let's get back to our slide deck, Jordan. We've just got a couple more slides, and we appreciate Jason Pavluchuk. Jason has represented a number of organizations I've worked with, ITS America, Fairfax County, Virginia, a number of the transit benefits companies, and just really has 20 years of really good insights kind of working at the ground level on the Hill, and we always appreciate what he is seeing. Okay. And I think we're going to start sharing. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to, is Burkenda on the call? Burkenda, you there? Well, perhaps not. So I'll walk it through. So what do we have planned for 2023? We are going to do more webinars. I think you should have seen it on our YouTube channel in 2022. We did a series of webinars on everything from the TCI to security issues, tolling as well. So we're going to be doing webinars on a variety of topics. These are the topics that we're thinking about first, on some on certification and interoperability and construction work zone safety and VRUs. But if you have topics, you have webinars, technical issues that you'd like to impart some wisdom on, reach out to Burkenda Cantlow or myself, and we'll be more than happy to work with you in constructing what we think will be a webinar that would be broadly beneficial to the industry. Next, please. And one of the directions that came from our board is that we want to do some more in-person workshops. We've been living in this virtual world for a while, but knock on wood, COVID seems to have died down. And so we are ready to get back and do some in-person events as well as some hybrid events. And we're looking to hear from you about what you think would be the most relevant and timely. And we'll be doing at least 3 of those in the coming year. We'll have some announcements targeting March for our first event in the DC area. So stay tuned for more details on that. Next, please. And of course, PlugFest. One of the reasons that I am here in the great state of Florida is that we are working with the Florida Department of Transportation and Florida Turnpike Enterprise on hosting a PlugFest in the spring, late spring, in Florida at the world-class SunTrax facility. Very excited about that. Also talking with Taiwan Telematics Industry Association about our first Asia PlugFest in Taiwan in D City. So we'll have some more information there. And then if need be, we may do another testing event in North America, but we'll have some more details about that. We'll do at least 2 events and possibly 3 in the coming year. So yet another reason to stay involved in this year, because we've had just outstanding participation in Malaga, and we were at M-City. We're going to close device testing and test equipment participation to OmniAir members only. So yet another reason to renew your membership. Okay, next, please. And as we are preparing that workshop and that conference, we'll be looking for speakers and ideas for panels. So please reach out to Burkenda Cantlow. She's more than happy to chat with you and gather your ideas and get that ball rolling early in the year. One more. And with that, that concludes our annual meeting of the membership. We're happy to take any questions from any of our members. You can feel free to reach out to any of us, but I wanted to thank you for your time today. Thank you for your dedication and your energy and your support for OmniAir over the past year and the coming year. And just wish you and your families and your friends and loved ones very happy holidays from all of us. And thank you from Jason, Burkenda, Ryan, and Randy. And we will see you back in January. Have a great rest of the year.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jason and staff.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.